I do in the sense it's kind of general, but I think our objective should be to compete to make the playoffs in 2013. That's not going to be easy. We may not make the playoffs, but I think we have to be competitive. And then in 2014, I think our mission needs to be that we're going to be in the playoffs in 2014, and hopefully, we're competing, we're pushing to have the best record in the East. And then by 2015, obviously, we want to be looked at as one of the top teams in the league. Now, it's easy to say all those things, but I do think in this league, you get certain tools when you're poor, and if you take good advantage of those tools, it gives you an opportunity to get a lot better. So, I believe it's important to have a little bit of a roadmap and to ask people to hold themselves accountable to those things. We'll have much more specific set of goals after I've had more time to spend with the coaches and so forth, whether it's home wins or home points or goal difference or goals against, whatever it might be. I believe that those things are important.
Earl and Paul have mentioned in the past that this team's close, 3 to 4 players away. Is that close?
I don't know. I need to spend more time with them to understand that. I think it begins with mentality, and I think this. Frankly, this team needs some work on its mentality. It reminds me a lot of where DC United was in 2010. That team had 22 points. This year was one of the best teams in the league. Finished third in points, improved by almost 40 points in 2 years. So it's doable. You need to be brutally honest about where you are and where your flaws are and what it's going to take to get better. And that's what we're going to start working on this afternoon as soon as we're done with this.
You spoke about liking a challenge. I mean, what was the impression of this franchise from the outside looking in, and how much work really needs to be done?
I think, my impression was I really and truly am a believer in having a strategy and a plan to go along with that strategy, and then making tactical decisions that support the strategy. My impression was that most of the decisions that were made here were tactical, that there wasn't kind of a guiding plan over the years, that they tended to be very short-term decisions. And that can, sometimes that works, but more often you end up paying a price for that. And I think, when you look at the roster of players who've worn the TFC uniform, you realize that there wasn't a lot of consistency in approach, and so players came and went without any particular rhyme or reason. So, and I don't say those things to be critical of the people that came before me, but I do think it's important to understand, how you got to a certain place, whether it's good or bad, and then, what you can learn from that.
Most times when a franchise is struggling, a lot of focus shifts to the coach. You were supportive of him. What do you know about him and why the support, and maybe knowing that he can turn this around?
Well, first of all, I just don't think it's all on the coach. The coach, unfortunately, gets too much blame when things go poorly and too much credit when things go well. It's really much more of an organizational approach that produces success. I know Paul. I thought Paul did an outstanding job in New England working with Steve Nicol, and I intend to spend a lot of time now with Paul and Earl and try to really understand what's the way forward for this group of guys. They obviously know these players a lot better than I do. I have impressions of them as opponents. They understand what they're like every day.
Sorry, just to caught the tail end of your initial answer to the initial question, but you talked about sort of a three-year plan moving forward. You think this team can compete for a playoff spot in 2013, not necessarily make it, compete for it in 2013, and then hopefully a division crown in a conference crown in 14.
Well, what I said is we want to be in a position to compete, to realistically compete to win the East in 2014. That may be a challenge. That may be a stretch, but I think we have to have a sense of where we're trying to go. And it can't be as vague as we want to get better. I think we have to hold ourselves accountable at some level to specific measures of success. And so the first one is next year. And there's a bunch of things below that, as I mentioned. I want to turn this place into Fort BMO. the biggest difference, if you look at the record of DC United between 2010 2012, is there's a massive difference in points at home. Just a huge difference. And you have to take the majority of points at home. That's a given. You can't be successful in this league if you don't do that. And you have to be defensively stout. You can't give up too many goals. So, you know, there's going to be a bunch of different kind of targets within that broader scope of goals. But I do think it's important to say this is what we intend to accomplish.
DC was pretty conservative with DPs compared to TFC's being very aggressive over the last year or so. What's your philosophy on the designated player?
You know, we didn't have the money that TFC had, but I actually think that I think that DPs are older, more experienced, bigger name DPs are a little bit of a luxury. They're almost the last piece that you get. And I'll tell you, and we did spend a lot of money on one DP, and it ended up being a mistake. But we had the best team in the league in 2006 and the best team in the league in 2007. We didn't win the cup, but we were back-to-back Supporters' Shield winners. That's only been done twice, and you know, 2 other times. We were one of the other times, and we went out and got Marcelo Gallardo. Now it turned out that he got injured and never was able to play to his potential. We were trying to jump to a different level and win CONCACAF. That's why we made that move. So he was kind of, we thought, the last piece. It didn't work out. I think that nowadays there's going to be some new rules put into place in the league that provide some cap incentives for looking at younger DPs. So, you know, it may be now where you're looking at a young DP who you think can become an appreciating asset and maybe can be on your team for 4 or 5, 6 years of really solid play. So, you know, if you can go out and get another Jaime Moreno or another Javier Morales or Christian Gomez, guys who you can really build your team around for a while, that's how I'd like to look at this for the future. You know, we have some DPs now who are under contract, and you know, we're gonna have to build a team around those guys to some extent. But I think the way the league is looking at this is going to change.